Our third attempt at Spielberg's films with 3 movies. I'll make it happen because
Part of the
now I can
charm.
just edit it and then. Welcome to the HolmFront. I am Tyler, your host, and to my right, as always, is Mitch, my overly artistic friend. I'm realizing how much work we're gonna have to do after all this recording. Whatever. Okay,
Sorry about that.
it is what it is. It's my fault. I didn't.
Oh, it's not your fault.
It's the machine.
It's the machine.
Ghost in the machine.
The ghost in the machine. Yes.
All right. As you've probably seen on the thumbnail already, we watched something recently.
We went through the Indiana Jones trilogy.
The original trilogy.
Are there others? I thought there was just 2.
We'll talk about that later, I think.
It's a duology, right? It's just
2 of them.
Raiders and Last Crusade. Is there
Which
any
is an
others?
interesting. We considered actually pulling out one of them. I won't mention which one, Temple of Doom, and putting that with the other 2 films that exist. But considering it came with the era,
Yeah,
we
I do
left
feel
it.
like it makes more
It deserves
sense.
to be there. Which brought up an interesting opportunity, which we'll go over. But this was your first time seeing Temple of Doom.
Yeah. It
Well,
was. It was an experience. Yeah, because I never watched it before. I'd obviously seen Raiders and Last Crusade a bunch as a kid, but I think I wasn't allowed to see Temple of Doom because it was just too dark, is what my family said.
We'll get into
And
that. We'll get into that. I wanted you to
I
answer
agree
that
with
one.
my
after.
family. My parents made the right call.
Right.
Thank you, Mom and Dad,
Well
for not
done.
letting me see that movie as a kid.
Yeah, I have nightmares now. All right, so let's start with Raiders. Well,
let's start
actually,
with Indiana Jones.
yeah, let's start with
and then
Indiana
we'll work
Jones.
our way into Raiders, and we're gonna big episode for you, I'll bet. So,
Yeah,
what is there to say about Indiana Jones? I mean, he's an iconic symbol of American filmmaking and history and all kinds of good stuff.
yeah, he's got so much wrapped into him. We were trying to kind of quantify it, and I think what it comes down to is he's got the dichotomy of his own nature, which I thought was interesting because he's got the rugged, adventurous, risk-taking kind of figure, which is always kind of appealing with the American culture. And then he's got the other side where he's a professor, Dr. Jones, which may or may not harken back to like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But I mean, it's not as dark as that story. But you know, he's got that dichotomous kind of nature to him.
Something of a more lighthearted mad
A
scientist.
lot more lighthearted than that one. But yeah, so he's got the brains, but he's also got, I guess you could call it brawn, for lack of a better word. And then it delves into like the mysteries of, I don't know, it's not American mythology, but it's mythology in general. Or
well, that's when it gets into that like 1920s and 30s sort of romanticism where you would travel the world and unearth all kinds of ancient artifacts and
yeah, the exploration.
Yeah,
mysterious.
Ancient cultures and civilizations are a fascinating concept at the time, and so then it's like the age of just go out there having an adventure,
right,
and hope you don't get found out by Cthulhu or something like that,
or whatever you might unearth.
Mm-hmm.
That would be interesting. Him going and researching Cthulhu. Like,
see, it would make sense too, actually, because he was written in that era. H.P. Lovecraft's writings came out in the 20s mostly. So, yeah, it would totally match up with that. It would be interesting to see him kind of tackle a Lovecraftian sort of setting. Because it's all like the pulp, fiction of the time.
Right.
When science fiction and horror were really kicking into high gear and were really engaged with it and it was becoming more readily available.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's probably some of the things that inspired it, like something like an Alan Quatermain, or that character that Arthur Conan Doyle brought up, who was based on his actual friend that went out on excursions and did that kind of thing. So yeah, it embodies all of that while putting it into the rugged American. He's got the hat and the leather jacket, and then
fights Nazis.
He fights Nazis. Yeah, exactly. Who will? Yeah, of course. He's got a whip, which I wonder if that's like inspired by. Because I know they give him a reason in the third film, but I wonder if that's something to do with American culture on some level. Like maybe it's a ranch hand or something.
Yeah.
Inspired that.
I was about to say that's what it makes me think of is
Sure.
like, ranchers and things like that. And it's that Wild West
kind of feel. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of that. Um, yeah, he's very American, and I kind of like that about him. But I also like how his just entire construction as a character is just like infused with so much that they could cram into there. It's
Yeah.
like, let's give him the whip and the hat, but also a professor with glasses,
Right.
like Superman or something like that. Like a Clark Kent duality, like a dual person. He's kind of like a comic book character in that way, right? Where he's got an alter ego and then like a superhero identity. No powers, but that doesn't mean there isn't supernatural elements in the world that
Right.
can come in. And it's just enough to kind of like feed into that, romantic vision of like, oh my gosh, what if you found some ancient relic, but there were mysterious powers associated
But all
with
the
it.
fears were founded on something
Yeah,
real.
yeah, exactly. And that gives it this really exciting payoff at the end.
Right.
At the end of an Indiana Jones movie, not before that point, because if you do it before, then it's probably too much.
Even then, well, I wonder what kind of questions came up with the end of this film with audiences. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. But yeah, and then he's got a counterpart in the film who's this very well put together British high class individual who sides with the Nazis.
Yeah.
And never gets his hands dirty. He always has someone else do his dirty work for him.
Oh, that's a
and
good way
then
to put
just
it, yeah.
takes away whatever Jones works for. He just waits there, and when Jones captures something, he's like, "All right, that's mine now." He's like an annoying
Leech.
sibling. He just goes and takes your stuff. So that part was interesting too, because they give that a bit of a dichotomy where it's like, I don't know, maybe it's a dig at British culture or something,
Mm-hmm.
but commonly in that era of filmmaking and in the era that it's referencing, British were often used as like the villains, the bad guys. But then it also has the Nazis, but the British guy sides with the Nazis. So it's like, I'm sure there's all kind of symbolism in there. But it's
but the real heroes are the Americans. That's the bottom line.
Those are the ones that'll punch the
very
Nazis in the face. They got it.
Well, yeah, because you were pointing it out in the movie as you're watching. You're just like the punch sound effects are just like.
It's very classic.
It's super, like comic book hero. I mean, it's one step away from having the pow
the
effect
Batman
up on screen.
Pow.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of stuff. Yeah, that stuff's awesome. And in some ways too, like now that it's been 40 years ish since the original came out, it's now reached this stage where it's an icon of like two eras of American history, because it's capturing the 20s and 30s, but it's also kind of capturing the 80s and 90s, that time period of just like movie making and a sense of like just like the scale and style. Like Spielberg to me feels like such an American filmmaker, I guess. Even though like I don't know if it's like that really makes sense, but I just mean that like he has a way of being like very intentional and directed in his execution, that he's just like, well, you're following the story and I'm just going to deliver on that story, and everything's going to add up to make sense within that narrative or within the character development or whatnot. And if you watch a lot of like foreign films, they'll have a different way of communicating a story that makes more sense to them and to the audience that they're making movies to, right?
Gotcha.
And so like Raiders being, this like picture perfect story, and the same could be said about Last Crusade. I feel like they're both just perfect screenplays, but they're perfect from the lens of like that American perspective. And so I feel like they're both really relevant films in terms of just the catalog of American filmmaking history.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, because it seems like, so from what I understand, Spielberg wanted to do a James Bond film, and this is my light knowledge of Spielberg. But he wanted to jump into the James Bond mythos.
Makes sense. Who wouldn't want to do a Bond
film? Well, especially one of the most successful directors at the time. And I mean, still, but at the time, he was pretty well renowned. He had done Jaws at this point, and then when was Back to the Future? Oh, Back to the Future's after all this, huh?
I think so. Back to the Future's 80s some point.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's got all this notoriety, but specifically from Jaws. I mean, that was it just shot to the top. And he and Lucas were kind of jumping back and forth between how successful they were, because then Star Wars came out and blew Jaws out of the water, and then
those are the two big they sort of set the precedence for the blockbuster, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and then from what I understand, once Star Wars had gained all this success, and then Lucas handed over Empire to a different director, he was talking to Spielberg about that idea and kind of presented this concept, and then they came up with the Indiana Jones. So there's a number of ideas, and I don't remember all the history of it. They went over that. I read a biography on Lucas, and they went over this, but they were talking about it, and the basis of it was I think Spielberg had been rejected to do a Bond film. I think he had applied, and they said no. And so Lucas was like, I have something that might fit in that vein. So Bond also, I guess, was some form of inspiration pushed into this. And then he was the one that ended up directing it. So I think they worked on the screenplay together.
Okay.
And Raiders of the Lost Ark, like you were saying, is such a tight, well-rounded screenplay. There's barely an ounce of fat on this thing. It just goes and goes and goes, and it doesn't miss a beat. Everything that it's trying to do, it does extremely well.
Yeah.
Makes all the Nazis look really evil. It references all these classic filmmaking techniques like the shadows on the wall, and then kind of like the mysterious past of your male lead, and then the spunky love interest that shows up. And she's a lot of fun too. We'll jump into that now, I guess.
Yeah, go for it.
Marion's just a fantastic co-star in this film.
She is.
Because she like the way that she begins is like she has this history with Jones that you don't know. But they solidify it by her hitting him in the first couple of seconds that they meet each other.
Yeah, she slugs him. It's not a slap.
Just like a boom.
Yeah,
like,
straight up,
just takes him
right
out.
hook.
And then she's shown to face down the Nazis that are coming in looking for what Jones was looking for. So she doesn't give in to what Jones asks of her. But then the Nazis come in, and she faces them down too. When they start to threaten violence, she gets a little bit like, oh, okay, never mind, they're serious. But she's spunky right up until that point, and then Jones comes in and starts laying lead, and that's when you're like, all right, they're American heroes taking them down.
Yeah, and it's such a you're talking about like the references. I don't know all of them, but there's certain ones that you can just kind of feel the energy come through. Like there's a shot of the Nazi characters or the bad guys because I think the lead guy's the Nazi and the rest are just like hired goons or whatever. But as they're walking in, it's like they have the broad shoulders and like the wide brimmed hats, and it's just a black silhouette.
It's almost like yeah, it's almost like noir filmmaking.
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah. it's got this like cartoonish energy to it, but it's just there. It's not like in your face. It doesn't like it's so over dramatic. It doesn't literally become a cartoon. So it's the kind of thing where the movie is very smooth to watch if you have no concept of the references. But if you do, then it just feels like it's
more rich.
Yeah, it's all the richer for it, exactly.
And it's an action adventure film. So everything that they do with these certain archetypes, like when they introduce the Nazis and such, they're introducing them in an action adventure way. They're not trying to delve in the depths of darkness that the Nazis embody.
But or to have like kind of dissertation about like the moral conundrums of it. It's more like, well, they're just the token bad guys because you remember them, right? And then that's knows their answer.
Yeah. And they rely on your knowledge of that. You're like, you know who they are. We don't really need to expound on it any further. But they do expound on some interesting things that are true, namely Hitler's interest in the occult and religious artifacts. And they use that as the catalyst to the adventure. And so what Hitler's looking for is the Lost Ark or the Covenant. There's some guys that come down to they're part of the American government, I guess. I'm not exactly sure what branch, but they come and tell Indy, they're like, hey, we had a guy looking for it in order to get to it before the Nazis did, because we don't know what it's capable of, but we know that they're interested. So regardless if it has any actual powers or not, we can take it away from them so that they don't get it first.
Yeah.
And maybe have some leverage, or maybe even use what capabilities it does have. And the guy that they sent out looking for the Ark is Marion's dad, who is the guy who trained Indiana. So Indiana goes to Marion first, and then ends up being conscripted to go after the Ark of the Covenant. So the rest of the film is him discovering the mystery of where the Ark is hidden, and then eventually finding the Ark, which is just a fun adventure idea. Like, who doesn't think that's awesome? Like, because they put in all their details, and a lot of these details, like, there's a lot of legends and myths surrounding the Ark and where it is today, where it, it travels through time. So they just went with their own theory, which is that it was in Egypt, and there's a certain way to find it, and so he has to get all the artifacts together in order to find the Ark. So there's a series of MacGuffins, but like I said, it's wrapped in this action adventure story, and so these are the things you want. Like, you want the quest, you want the side quests that lead to the main quest. Like, that's what the adventure story is about, and they nailed it.
Yeah, they're totally on point with that.
Yep.
I love to seeing him just as the professor with like teaching a class with the glasses and everything. And it's like that Clark Kent kind of persona that he puts on.
Right. Because they start him in his adventure garb.
Yes.
He's like at the whip, and like they get this
and they don't
real
reveal
fun
his
introduction.
face.
Yep.
And it's just, who is this mysterious figure? Because that's again going back to that style of the audience doesn't know.
Right.
So like we'll build up
Who
some
is
mystique
this
around them.
mysterious man.
With the style of the filmmaking.
Right.
Which now like still happens, but it feels like it's to a lesser degree. Or I mean, there might be like new tactics that you might invent, like Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. You know, when they introduced the Joker and that, it's this scene where it's all these clowns robbing a bank, and one of them is the Joker.
But you don't know that.
You don't know that yet, so they're just kind of, you know, you're seeing his plan unravel and getting a sense for how the character works. And this is kind of like that, where it's like he knows where to go. He checks the poison dart, and then just like, okay, whatever, I know what that is. And like someone pulls out a gun. It's got that like push and zoom on the guy as he's gonna betray him, and then Jones flips around and whoosh, with the whip.
Not gonna get the beat on me.
Yeah, exactly. Can't sneak up on.
Not on this Mr. Jones. Not on Indiana.
A real American. I mean, even his name, Indiana, he's like named after a state.
Right.
It's like, what do you like
That's
encapsulated, you know?
Which they expound upon in Crusades, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So they show him there, and then they show him as a professor. So they show that he actually knows what he's doing, what his interests are, and his interests are to get these things and put them in a museum. That's where he mentions it in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so one of the deals he makes with the government is like, if we find the Ark first, it's got to go in a museum where it belongs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's later expounded upon in Crusade as well.
Something about that actually that is interesting is I wonder if perhaps they were also trying to reference the space race a little bit, because they're both, because it is a race to get to the Ark.
Right.
And they don't know like the degree it has power or not, but it's too risky to let it just go unattended.
Too risky.
So yeah, they gotta hunt it down in time. So I wonder if that was also harkening to that, because then it's 20s, 50s, and 80s, just kind of like, you know, infusing a lot
Space
of
Race is 60s, but yes,
or 60s, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
They land in 69. Yeah, so all that stuff is like encapsulated in this movie. Just so great. I don't know if there's too much more. I would ask, would you rate it? What would you rate Raiders?
Oh, I mean, this is a perfect movie. Like, so if I had to give it a score, it's just a 5 out of 5, you know? Because I find nothing wrong with it. Like, there's a lot of snakes. I don't like snakes.
That's just a personal
But I tolerate it because I mean,
but
who
you
doesn't
relate
love
with
Indiana
that.
Yeah, I totally will endure for the sake of Indiana Jones. You know, that classic adventure hero. It's so interesting to me how, because I remember when I first was introduced to Indiana Jones as a kid, my impression of him was that he just must have so many movies. There must be like thousands of them. You know, they've been making these movies for decades.
Well, that's what he was going for, because he's basing, I think both of them have this inspiration, Lucas and Spielberg. They both grew up watching these serials. And so, and I think I've mentioned this in a previous episode, but from what I understand, in the theater, when you went to go see a movie, they would play a bunch of shorts that Hollywood would just produce super cheaply. So you have these like random episodic adventures that you could see. And this is before everyone had a TV in their house. And then shortly thereafter, TVs started getting released and becoming more of a popularized thing. And that's when they started releasing these serials. That's when you had stuff like Star Trek or I Love Lucy or things like that, where they would be popularized. And these are the things that most of these kids would grow up with. And so it's very episodic. Like, tune in next week and see, will he make it? Or, you know, like, and this is harkening
back. Episode
back.
Where it's like some hero, some guy in like a crappy costume with a jetpack, and then like laser blasters or whatever, and then he'll get caught and he'll be like on the treadmill leading up to like saw blades or whatever, and then it'll like freeze, and then will he make it out of this one?
Tune in next Saturday. Yeah, the Buck Rogers type.
Yeah. That stuff.
Right.
So there's that kind of energy to it as well. So yeah, so it's strange to me though that I picked up on that even as a kid, just watching it going, well, there must be 1,000 Indiana Jones
Right.
movies.
This got to come out every Saturday morning, right? Like, this is what this feels like. But
Without realizing how much work these movies were to make.
Yeah,
'Cause
seriously.
there's so much more detailed and nuance. Like, some of the shots, like, where the shadow was placed, like, there's one where Indiana Jones is leaving Miriam's establishment, and he stops and turns around, and, like, the light coming through the door.
Just reaches his eye.
Yeah, it just reaches his eye, and the rest is, like, all in shadow. I'm like, okay, so if you want a shot like that, it's going to take some time to get everything set up.
Stand right here and
Right.
don't turn your head any further than 46 degrees.
Right, exactly. Like, you have so much work to make that happen.
Yep, but they did.
As a kid, you're just like, wow, that's
a great shot. That's all I know about it.
Yeah, it looked easy.
That was, and that's what makes it a great film.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, great script, great casting, phenomenal filmmaking. Like, it's because, like I said, it's handling all the things it's referencing, even on a subconscious level. Like, even if you don't understand all the references, you're getting it. You get the excitement and the feeling from it. You get the emotional response.
It was kind of like its own Stranger Things in a weird way, where it's the amalgamation of these different sources of inspiration, and then it becomes something new. Although I do feel like Stranger Things wears its inspirations more on its sleeve, because a lot of them are very easily
that's what
like,
it is,
"Ooh, that's
right?
what it is." Yeah, exactly. Whereas Indiana Jones was more like, well, it's more about the vibes from those things,
Right.
not so much like, oh, this specific person or this specific moment. It's just kind of riffing in that sphere, as if you were to make it at the time, but with modern technology, kind of thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with that, do you have anything more to say on Raiders? Okay. So let's jump in to Temple of Doom.
So who leads this? Because you saw that a long time ago, but I'm just brand new. I just watched it.
So I'll just give briefly. I also was not allowed to watch this movie.
Okay.
For
Can't imagine why.
All of the reasons that we're about to get into. I watched it later, and I gotta say I did not like it when I watched it eventually, and I didn't quite know why. But then I watched it again recently for this episode, and I was like, okay, I get why I don't like it. So what I'll do first, is I'm gonna throw it over to you, because this is your first time watching this, which I find absolutely insane. Because obviously, I couldn't wait until I was old enough to make that decision where I just went and watched it. I was like, okay, I'm going to go watch Temple of Doom. But then I was like, oh, boy. Okay. So this is one of the first. We actually fact-checked. It's not the first, but it's one of the first PG-13 ratings. Because it didn't quite fit PG. Didn't quite fit R. It probably should have just been R. Didn't quite fit, apparently. But so it's got a PG-13 rating. I want to see what did you think of your first viewing of Temple of Doom?
Thought it was bad. I pretty much disliked almost everything about it. Short Round was somewhat redeemable, but he was still
annoying.
He was still annoying just for the fact that it's like he's like, you got kids for okay. I can't. This movie's too much. I got to start from the beginning, or I'm just going to get all
rewind.
So let's back up for a moment.
Okay,
so the movie starts, and it does like a James Bond kind of thing, where like he's got like the nice suit, and then he's doing some deal. And the premise of this start doesn't bother me, because it's similar to the first one, where Indiana Jones starts off on an adventure, and he's got to get that statue, the classic, and then run from the boulder or the traps or whatever. So it's like it starts off with something exciting and something more that Indiana Jones would do, not, what's his name? Barely know his real name. Dr. Jones, I guess.
Indiana? Oh.
No, his real name.
Harrison Ford?
No, the character's name. We just always call him Indiana Jones. What was his other name, though? They reveal it in
Junior. I don't remember.
That's right, it's just Junior.
Yeah.
That's right, we don't actually know his name. I forgot about that. Okay. Anyways, so it makes sense that he would be Indiana Jones and not Dr. Jones. Just say Dr. Jones. So I didn't have a problem with the idea behind it, but there's a couple of issues. One is that everything that happens in that opening scene has nothing to do with anything. Whereas in the first one, the statue they recover means nothing, but it is a way to introduce Belloc. And Belloc is his nemesis, so they need to establish that relationship early on and see how that plays out. they also have the excuse that they need to introduce us to the main character as well, and to see him. It would be kind of weird if they were like, "Here's some college professor," and then they're like, "By the way, he's an action hero." You'd be like, "Wait, what? He can do what?" You know what I mean? So we need to kind of acclimate and see him at his best foot forward first. But Temple of Doom, you don't need any of that. So instead, it's just like, well, let's use this to introduce our side characters, which is Short Round, and then the other
The blonde lady.
the blonde singing lady,
So
who's insufferable in this movie.
I also want to harp on the fact that when in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when he's introduced, he also shows it's his competence, it's his grit, and then it's also his wit, because he fills the bag with sand, he flips it, doesn't quite work out, so he has to improvise.
But conceptually, it makes a lot of sense.
It makes sense. And then Bellick comes over, steals it, and then he has a conversation with Marcus saying, I had it in my hands, I wanted to give it to the museum, I do this for work. So he's a professor, but he also gets paid to get these artifacts. And so he actually trades a couple other artifacts that weren't as important for cash, but it's not just the cash, because he even says that to Marcus later when the government offers to pay him to get the Ark. He's like, it's not about the money. It's this important historical artifact. The money is just the means to an end to him. He's like, I just get paid so that I can get this thing, this important artifact, into the viewing of the public, essentially, or for whatever other purpose they might use it. So in this one, they introduce that he gets the ashes of this emperor from some dynasty, and he is intentionally switching it over for a diamond. So he's like, because they try to pay him in gold coins. He says, no, I want the diamond.
Yeah.
And you're left there wondering, like, what's the importance of this diamond? Like, why do you care about a diamond?
Yeah, he wouldn't. He would care about the artifact.
But then the movie shows you later that it wasn't important at all.
Right.
The diamond.
So your assumption is correct when you see that scene.
So the diamond is just there because now it becomes the interest of the female lead. So it's playing on this thing where it's like, yeah, women like diamonds, so she'd be after this diamond, because then it goes into this whole fiasco of a scene.
Yeah, it gets way too much.
Where he gets poisoned by drinking something that Indiana Jones would never drink, and then the guy's like, I have the antidote, ha 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 ha, and then it gets on the floor with the diamond, and people are running everywhere. These things get kicked all over the place. The girl's going after the diamond. He's going after the antidote.
And then chaos, and there's these balloons falling down.
Just completely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just so much. It's so much stuff. We're gonna come back to this scene when we get to Last Crusade, because there's a nice comparison to make about how Last Crusade is like, well, this is all we need from this, and that just really speaks to Temple of Doom. The whole script is. Someone needed to be there to say, well, all you really need is this little bit. The rest of this is just way too much, way too much.
Take it out.
It's too ridiculous. It's too dark.
Highlight,
it's too
delete.
something. It's just too something. There's always something wrong with it. So, yeah, that happens. And then it's like high octane all the way through after that with their whole escape route. And then they land out in, like, where is it? I forget.
I think it's
now.
India.
India? Okay, somewhere out in India, I guess. That's right, yeah, because they start in East Asia, and then they're like China or somewhere like that, right?
Yes, and then they jump on a plane.
And then they jump on a plane, and then there's
the guy just parachutes out and leaves them, and they leap out, get on a river, and they land in India. I have not checked all the geography.
The way he said that makes no sense, but that's basically how they
what
depicted
happens
it in the movie. It's pretty much exactly
They
like
jump
that.
out of an airplane in a blow-up raft, land on the mountains, skid down the mountains into a river, and then float down the river to India.
Yeah, I follow that.
This is Temple of Doom.
Okay. So then the story decides, okay, well, the script decides, oh, well, we need to have a story now. So forget everything you just saw. None of that matters. That's just a way to get our three main characters together, which is really weird because they don't do any character bonding. They don't, connect in any way. Short Round is a friend of Indy for some reason. They've been friends for a while, I guess. And that's just it. They're just friends. They're already friends.
He's
so they
here.
don't need to.
You don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they don't have to
Wouldn't
work
you,
for it.
as an adventurer that goes consistently to dangerous places in the world, drag around an 8-year-old with you?
Probably not.
Why not? While you're at it,
I just don't want to endanger a kid.
While you're at it, bring along a completely useless and incompetent character as well.
Well, that's the thing too. Like when Indiana Jones interacts with Miriam for the first time, she sets the context of that conversation because he's there just for the information or the disc or whatever, the item that he needs to get the
Well, there
plot
was
going.
reasons.
Yeah.
It's his mentor's daughter.
Yep.
She has the artifact.
Right.
And she's spunky and capable enough to then set the precedence of that conversation.
Well, yeah, because she's upset at him of a past
Right.
history because
And
was
she
a
knows that
previous
there's
love
value
interest.
in what he wants.
Right.
So she can make him wait for it.
Exactly. So then it creates an interesting conversation, a
Right.
dynamic one, where, each character has a hill to stand on and a hill to die on. And, you get to see that back and forth. That tension is really good. Well, when you switch over to this movie, all she cares about is the diamond. All she cares about is living large. And she's just like, I don't want to eat that. There's like snakes and stuff in the jungle. Oh my gosh. And she's just complaining and whining the whole movie. So it doesn't let up the entire time. So you get that awfulness. But there's like one redeemable thing here, and before it just completely spirals out, and it's that some of the cinematography I think is quite nice.
It is.
I do love the establishing shot of this village, which has just totally been decimated. And then there's the similar shot at the end of the movie after it's been restored to life and it's green again and everything. It's like magic or whatever. So I liked that parallel of shots, and I also just liked kind of the look of the film in a number of places because it did feel like it was. I guess that's just the result of the product of its being its time, but it did feel right in terms of the visual presentation. But all of that can only take you so far. So here was a big crucial mistake. Instead of this whole fiasco sequence to get to India, after the whole East Asia thing, just go right back to the U.S. and have him teach in a class. And then you need to reintroduce the sense of adventure, and he has to go out again to India. And when you do that, you need to make sure this whole diamond whatever nonsense has to play a role in this.
He hands the diamond over because it's important. He wants to put it in the museum. Whatever.
Yeah, it needs to have some relevance.
Right.
Oh, you got us that diamond. Actually, did you know the diamond is associated with this? We were hoping you would go the extra mile and see this through, or blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
The one thing I'll say...
Because this needs to be a call to action. And instead, we go like this 15-minute period of just nonsense that doesn't mean anything. And then it's the villagers who are like, here's our plight. You should help us. It's like, I mean, sure, but shouldn't he be trying to get Short Round home?
Or something.
Like, he's just a kid.
Or her,
yeah. Or himself.
She's going to die out there, just lack of competence on anything.
Yeah. I mean, she can, to be honest, don't think it's going to be in tears about that.
No, not at all. I will say, so what they were probably trying to do was not be so formulaic that it gets stale. Because you don't want to just repeat the same thing over and over and over. Because that's what Raiders did. He does the quick adventure thing, gets a call to action, and then goes out and does the new adventure, right?
Well, yeah, but isn't that what the serials are like?
Sure. Yeah, no, I get your point. But I'm thinking that that's probably what they were trying to do, is just put a new spin.
To deviate away from it.
But the thing was, it was so disconnected that it didn't make sense. Because, he goes out here, he does some random thing that you don't get to see. You have this interaction that's kind of like James Bond-esque. And then, just by happenstance, lands in this area where then they ask him to do something. So there's all these random events that land in here, and then he goes out and does this thing. So there is a call to action. But he just kind of lands there.
Awkward, random.
Right. And it's not because of what he wants or what he doesn't travel there in order to, like, it's not someone coming up and being like, we're noticing some weird things happening in India. We want you to go to check it out. Or something, along those lines.
Anything.
Someone sent in a letter saying, we lost our stones. Please come help us find them. Like, he just happens to land in this village, and then they're like, this is our plight. Please help us. And then he's like, sure, all right. And then he goes out and does it.
Yeah.
And for him, in that setting, like, he would have been someone and been like, all right, you keep the lady and Short Round. I'm going to go find the stones, and I'll be right back. Instead, he takes them with him, puts this kid and this woman who has no idea what to do out in the wilderness in danger, potentially. And it's like, well, none of these things feel like what Indiana Jones would have done. And I don't understand, like, why this is important to him, except, yeah, he's bringing this village back to life, but it's not...
It wouldn't happen like that.
Right.
The thing. Like, the way it would happen is they would ask Jones to go out to India to do something, collect some artifact or whatever. And then when he gets there, he recognizes the plight of the village and sees that as the more important goal.
Well, that would be an interesting moral conundrum at the end, right? Is by collecting the stones, he would be stealing the life from the village. So he has a
Right.
chance of either bringing it to a museum or leaving it with these people. And then it would just be about him having the adventure, and he'd have to go back to the museum and be like, I didn't find it, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be the difference.
right.
Maybe they call it actions all the same, and then at the end, the ending is what makes it unique, right?
Yeah, because especially if he's going to be kind of hesitant, because this actually takes place before Raiders. So technically,
Right.
he's not, as far as we know, been exposed to anything supernatural yet, because he does seem pretty dismissive of the idea that there's supernatural elements associated with the Ark of the Covenant in Raiders.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, if that's your choice, then we're going an origin story, or prior to experiencing that, then that would make a lot of sense. He's like, well, it's just an artifact. These people are suffering not because of the artifact, just because of other reasons. And then he starts to see the power associated with it, and then comes to recognize, okay, so I think it does matter. And then he returns it, and then he's like, all right, yeah, I'll make that excuse.
Or maybe he even justifies it as like, well, these people believe it. And like I'm seeing some stuff that I don't necessarily understand, or I can't quite explain. But I don't want to accept that. But these people want these stones, and it seems to be really important. So I'm going to leave it because that's more important to me than my notoriety in the museum or something.
Right.
But that would have been a more interesting and more Indiana way of dealing with it. I also don't understand the justification of it being before Raiders, because this is supposed to be a year before Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I don't understand why. It's like, why do you need this before the events of the Ark? It might have made more sense if it was after the events of the Ark, because then he's more willing to accept something supernatural.
Yeah. Maybe that was the idea, is they didn't want him to feel that way. Yeah, I don't really get it either, though, and I don't think if it.
But I also don't understand why this movie was made the way it was anyway. So
yeah, so I don't know if I can explain the script to you either.
the only thing that seems to be an explanation, again, speculation, but this seems to be the ongoing theory, is that George Lucas had gone through a pretty rough divorce after 15 years of marriage from his wife, Marcia. And then Spielberg was a producer on the Twilight Zone movie. And on that set, 2 kids and a helicopter pilot had died pretty tragically. So they were both in really, really rough moods. And that lent to the dark nature of this film, because it gets really dark.
Yeah.
Really dark.
That really shocked me. Like, I was genuinely shocked, because normally, like, I'm just like, crank up the dark. That's how I
Sure.
like it, my entertainment.
But it
this
depends
went
on the product,
way too far.
This is an action adventure film, and they're like, we're going to make this like a Nosferatu type of dark. Like, let's put some content in here and really shock people.
Yeah.
And boy, did it shock.
Like, there's this disgusting dinner scene that I guess is pretty notorious now, because they're just eating the grossest things, and a lot of it, I'm like,
monkey brains and like live snakes out of a dead mother snake. They're like popping out, and just like blood,
like
and
slice
guts
it open or whatever, which also doesn't make sense, because snakes lay eggs.
They do.
So that doesn't make any sense at all. They slice open the snake, and then there's all these baby snakes come out of it. Then they eat those, and then they get some soup.
He's all like,
and
that snake, like, ugh.
And then they get like soup, and it's got like human eyeballs floating in it. It's like, oh, come on. Like, people in India don't eat that stuff. Like, geez.
You ever been to Indiana? I mean, just saying, man.
They took it too far.
They
took it way too far.
And that's not even the worst of it.
That's not even the worst. Yeah, the worst of it was when they're making human sacrifices, and they literally like drive his fist into like someone's chest and rip his freaking heart out. I was like, whoa. Did we need to do that?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Of course. Duh.
And then it goes even further, where they capture Indiana Jones and they make him drink blood out of a human skull. And then he drinks it and he spits it out. And then they force it down his throat.
Well, no, they torture him.
Yeah.
They have a voodoo doll, and they stick its
yeah.
head in the fire so it torments him.
That's right. Voodoo doll it up, and then drink the blood from the skull.
And then he drinks it, and he becomes this like mindless zombie. And
Yeah.
then they force him. They force him to watch while they're about to kill his friends.
And then
like,
he helps contribute to that because he's brainwashed for it. I mean, there's a whole
Jeez.
sequence where he's like laying on this this ladder, and there's like candles all around him. He's like,
It's
like
like
the poison,
ritualistic, and he's like,
I'm like, what the crap?
like, good Lord. How far did you need this?
I mean, I'll tell you what. If they were trying to reference the Lovecraftian stuff, it's like, okay, I get where you're going with that, but this was not the way to do it.
There's a way to do that, and that wasn't it.
It would have been way more. The Lovecraft stuff would have been way less in your face about it. It would have been
True.
far more just like, what
It's like
are
letters
they
and
doing?
stuff that he's reading or something.
Right. And then
Yeah.
you find out more slowly, and then it's like there would have been a prominent character throughout the whole thing, like that
Yeah.
girl or whatever. She would have been like a cult leader or something, and she's really competent, and it was all just an act. That's how like a Lovecraftian narrative would have played
Yes.
out, and it would have been like, ooh, geez, I misread that. Crap.
You know what this reminds me of? Did you watch the Peter Jackson King Kong? Because
Yes.
my
And I know exactly what you're talking about.
gosh,
That's
that-
another movie that has no business being as dark as it is.
no. And I remember seeing that when I was a kid because I was like, oh, Peter Jackson, King Kong? Like,
Sounds great.
sounds like a match made in heaven. I went and saw it with my dad. And my dad hates scary movies. And this, like, Peter Jackson definitely went as far as he could, like, in the horror movie realm.
Yes.
Because they get to Skull Island, and you're just thinking, all right, fun adventure. King Kong's going to show up, and it's going to be this whole thing. Because everyone knows the King Kong story.
Yeah.
But they're like, what if they're sacrificed to Kong by a tribalistic, ritualistic way? And I was like, it gets so dark out of nowhere. It just like takes a dip. And I was like, I just came because I saw like King Kong fighting T-Rexes and stuff on the trailer. And this one's like these people, their eyes are rolling back in their head and they're like chopping people's heads off and they're like holding people down on these rocks and like bashing their heads in and stuff. I'm like, okay, what's going on? And then you like burst out on the other end and it's like, okay, we're back to the King Kong movie. And I was like, what did I just see? And it's like, wait, just kidding.
Right. Because
We're going to have a whole other horrifying sequence. They're going to go into the trench and they're all going to die. And like,
they're going to get eaten by insects.
Yeah.
Giant insects will consume them.
And
And,
I
they're
don't-
like eating people by the head. And you're like,
I will never
"Ooh."
forget that scene. Andy Serkis getting his head leeched. I'll
Oh.
never forget it. It horrified me. I
Oh.
was terrified for weeks. It was just,
And then there's like Adrian Brody
horrified.
has like the roaches or whatever, like
oh,
clawing on
he's
him.
like,
And they're like, don't move, get it off me. And then just like,
the kid's like trying
like-
to shoot him off.
and
Yeah.
like the music is just
It
so.
gets quiet.
It's like, it's real low, and
Ugh.
it's just eerie and uncomfortable
That's
and
what Temple of
desperate.
Doom does. It's like, remember
Ugh.
this fun Indiana Jones movie? Those are over.
That's
This is
gone.
horrifying and dark, and just you are gonna see hearts being pulled out. It's gonna beat in his hand after he
He's gonna
rips it out of that
Drink
chest.
blood.
Drink it out of his skull. What is going on? And yeah, and then they must have got a big backlash because Last Crusade is like, we're just kidding. We didn't mean any of that. Sorry.
It was just so much. Like, we have to go all the way to that extreme. Like,
No,
holy crap.
We didn't. But boy, whatever they were feeling came out on screen for sure. You got it.
I mean, because there's not really even a villain to this. I mean,
There is. It's the movie.
basically. Yeah, because the villain is like the cultist guy who's just like sacrificing people or whatever. And like, that's not really anything to play off of like Belloc was. I
Right.
mean, even the Nazi guy who's like, we did not come in to drink. I mean,
Yeah.
even him, he was, someone who could be a counterpoint because he can at least talk like a human being. The other guy was a psycho, just murdering people, pulling
Yeah.
out hearts.
There's no talking with this man. We kill him. You just shoot him.
Yeah, there's no negotiation. There's no reason. Don't even try. Oh, and then at the end, when they're on the bridge scene, he like chops the bridge so it breaks
Yes.
in half, and then all the bad guys are falling into this river with a bunch of crocodiles, and the crocodiles are just like
Oh,
chowing
my
down.
gosh.
It's just dinner time.
It's like, you guys know what crocodiles do to people, right? Well, if you don't, we want you to see it. So we're going to show you like 4 times what crocodiles do to the human body. Like, dude, It is so much. So welcome to Temple of Doom. I'm glad that you're on the train of those who have been disturbed by that movie, seeing the depths of where Spielberg and Lucas can go.
It was pretty dark.
Welcome.
I will say yes, thank you. I've been initiated. It's like I'm being initiated into that cult. It's creepy.
We drank out of human skulls afterwards. It was great.
Oh my God.
Follow tradition.
Exactly.
Anyway.
It's customary. The one thing I did like about it, though, is the minecart sequence. Just because I love
the
minecarts.
most video game portion of that
gets
movie.
like hard video game out of nowhere, and it's like it's just like Donkey Kong. Like you could see them basically like pick up the cart as they're going for where there's a broken track, and then they just pick up the cart and then land on the track on the other side. It was like one step away from that. I kind of wanted that to happen.
It was close enough.
I was like, he can do it. Come on, he's Harrison Ford.
You start to see his legs like.
Yeah.
Temple of Doom. Would not recommend. What would you rate this?
I think this is a genuinely bad movie. It's not even just a bad
script.
I was gonna say Indiana Jones picture or even a Spielberg picture. Like it's just bad on every level. I don't know what to say. Like, I mean, there's this whole scene in the middle where they're gonna like make love or whatever. Jones and the love interest. Why she's so annoying. What does he see in her? And then, like, it's like this gimmicky laugh out loud moment or something. I'm like, what is this? There's no heart here. Like, well, at least the connection with Miriam, that had a lot of soul to it.
Well, they had a past.
Exactly.
That was the thing. They had the chemistry in the past.
But they also had just good chemistry in the movie that we could follow.
This one, he goes in, and you don't really understand why. But then he's, like, expecting something from her. She's like, I'm not that easy. He goes, fine. And then he leaves. And she's like, you'll be back in 5 minutes. And then
they're counting down the 5 minutes.
Yeah, they're like watching the clocks and who's going to break first. And I'm like, what is this? This is not the way an Indiana Jones romance happens. Because, like, especially when you set the precedent with Miriam, is like, well, that happened when they were both young. His dad or her dad was his teacher, so they would have a lot of interaction. Like, you can understand all the history there.
Yeah.
And that why he would leave at some point because he's this kind of independent natured, but also someone who probably felt like that situation just bred that and it wasn't organic to what he wanted. So when he comes back, like then he realizes all the actual qualities that Miriam has. So like it would inspire some more potential romantic feelings. This one just is like none of that. She's just this singer that happens to catch a ride with him. And like they imply at some point that maybe there was something there, but then the rest of it's just forced. It's like, well, she's the female on screen, so they would like each other. It's like, not really, no. But they resolved that in the third film, which I think we should just transition to at this point, because I think we've beaten up poor Temple of Doom enough, unless you have another thing to say.
I mean, I could go on and on about that movie and just how
it might be
crazy
best
it was.
that we don't.
But yeah, I won't, do that to spare everyone the time. So I will just say that like I can kind of see if they were trying to kind of hark on like some of the darker elements like the Nazis dying from witnessing the Ark in the first one where they're like and the faces melting and stuff. I was like, okay, so I see where they're pulling on that. They're like, well, we did that and that was okay. So they're like pushing that agenda a little bit, and then maybe they were kind of trying to reference like Lovecraftian stuff or whatever. I'm like, I can kind of see it with like the candles and the possession and stuff like that. But I'm just kind of like, the way they tried to, or rather didn't try to acclimate us into that space, that's where it just goes horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. Like this movie could theoretically work if like the pieces were set up a little better. It would still be dark, but you could kind of make a case for why that would make more sense to us for, because it just seems like there's crazy business going down in India and don't go there. It's very dangerous. It's like this screaming message that you get from it, as opposed to something that's a little bit more nuanced. And then you'd be like, okay, like, I don't want to say like throw the Nazis in again, but if like, let's say the Nazis were involved, then it's like you have a faction that's a little bit more, it's like thinking about the situation. Like the cultist people, they're just like, well, let's just sacrifice whoever. Like it's too simple. Sure. You know what I mean? He doesn't have a conversation with the cult leader who's like, well, we have to do this because of this. This is blah, 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 blah. These are our reasons. He's just like, drink the blood of the skull.
I'm basically Satan here.
Yeah. And so you're like, okay.
Well,
way into this.
The point that you were making about the arc is that they show a picture in the beginning of like how terrible this can be. It's like, don't mess with stuff you don't understand. Because they show a picture, one of the guys is like, what's all that? And he's like, well, it's like fire or lightning or wrath of God, something that killed everybody that touched the ark.
Right.
And so it's like, this is something very serious. And then they pay off on it, where it's like showing, okay, this is what happens when you play around with things you don't understand. And but they led up to it. It's like a build up in a way by showing why people want it. It's like there was a good reason to want it. There's also no way to harness this the way you want to.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to be in this invincible army because even by opening it, it's going to wipe out everybody that showed any interest because it's not something you should show interest in. But it's like the nature of that, right? It's these things that you don't understand is like what they could be because you're romanticizing it into something that it is. So
yeah.
When you get to this one, though, yeah, it doesn't personify any of that. And it also doesn't attribute it to something that you don't understand. It's just another human being ripping out other human beings' hearts. Like, this is an item that, like, is supposed to contain the glory of God. And so by playing with that, like, the consequences could be pretty dire. Right. This one, he just happens to run into this really evil person. And so it's like, oh, this is not like something that you could justify. It's just a bad guy.
Well, yeah, because they don't explain the lore of the stones at all. It's just like these random stones. And like,
or the lore of the cult.
Or the cult, yeah, for that matter. So you're just like, what are we dealing with here? Like, and again, this is also why it was very important that they had that scene in both Raiders and Last Crusade. And it's like, you might be like, oh, it's too much repetition. It's like, well, at some point, somehow, you have to establish, like, what are the artifact that we're looking into and who are the major players going to be involved with that?
But that's something that would last through history, too, is like, something like that would leave an impact. It would last through time.
A cult that rips people's hearts out? I don't know.
Not so much.
I don't think anybody remember that.
He probably had a reason. All right, so with that, let's jump into Last Crusade.
Agreed.
So final film.
And my personal favorite. I love this movie. I have so much fun with this movie. I have too much fun with this movie.
Well, I mean, how could you not? And I remember we were talking about this. We went and rewatched Last Crusade. Did we watch that one first or Temple of Doom first? We watched Temple of Doom first because we had the palate cleanser afterwards. So I watched Raiders. We rewatched all three of these just to get a refresher. Watched Raiders, and then I waited for you specifically for Temple of Doom because I knew you hadn't seen it. And then we watched Last Crusade. Last Crusade is such a return to form. It's like they realized all the mistakes they made, and they made sure they made none of them again. But they also improved. So I had this, I don't know, back and forth in my own mind. I talk to myself a lot. I think that's a problem for some people, but I was like, which one do I like more? Is it Last Crusade or is it Raiders? Because, man, they're both so good. And Raiders just nails it. Right out the gate, nails it. And I was like, how could you not love that? But also, is Crusade better? And as I was thinking about it, I was like, you know what? What probably happened and probably why I like it the most is that Raiders, even though it came out with a perfect swing, it's probably a good like 4.5 out of 5. And then Temple of Doom, it was probably like a 1 or a 2 out of 5. And then Last Crusade is just the formula perfected. Like they came back and they were like, what made that one great? What can we change just enough to make a different movie than Raiders, but still have that perfect formula of Indiana Jones? And man, it was a knockout. I was like, okay, there's nothing here I would change. Nothing. And I can't say that I would change anything in Raiders either, but this one just seems like it has the quality. Like everybody was working on all cylinders to make this thing work out. And it just landed so perfectly.
I think the energy is a little more lighthearted too, because
a lot more adventure.
Yeah, the addition of Sean Connery in the place of Miriam as your kind of, sidekick character, I think was an interesting choice because Sean Connery adds a lot more humor than Miriam did, just because of the type of character she is versus the type of character that he is. But you're still able to get the dramatic parts with Sean Connery's character because it's, Indiana Jones's dad.
More so, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, and in some ways, yeah, absolutely. So I just feel like that was kind of where the magic happened with it,
Yes.
because he adds that levity, but then it's like you're also learning more about the serious history of the two characters as well.
Yeah, and that's probably on the building side of things. You had, so Miriam had to pass, but it was just like a love interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is Indiana's actual dad, but it's also Sean Connery, who is well aware of what he's doing. So he holds an amount of gravitas that just bleeds through anything he does,
Mm-hmm.
and he can play off anybody. So playing off of Harrison Ford, like, it just provided a really great back and forth. But he holds his presence so well on screen, and he knows exactly what he needs to bring to this character. So all that bleeds through. But there is also the love interest, but it doesn't have a past. So
Right.
this love interest is more to form of what Indiana Jones would like. But outside of that, it's not the sidekick. They bring in Sean Connery. They do
Mm-hmm.
like a trade off, I guess. But Sean
There's kind
Connery's
of a handoff a bit.
right.
Yeah.
But Sean Connery is the one that actually provides more substance to the film,
Mm-hmm.
whereas she's more
Elsa, right?
yeah, Elsa. I guess you could call her the fish out of water character, because she's the one, even though she's acting it, which you learn later in the film, she's the one to whom Indiana Jones can explain things to. So she's us for the first portion of the film, and
Mm-hmm.
then she switches at the end to where now it's like they do a rotation where Indiana
Oh, okay.
Jones becomes the fish out of water because Sean Connery's the expert. So now he's the one giving
Oh.
information to Indiana. And so you realize the different, because Indiana Jones says in the beginning, "No, this is my dad's field. He's the one that was obsessed with the Ark for his whole life."
Mm.
He's like, I know enough because I was around that for so long, but my knowledge only goes so far. So then when Sean Connery takes the wheel, he's the one pushing all the information to Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
So now you get their dichotomy. So it's this really interesting way of like building on the character of Indiana Jones, because you get to meet his dad, you get to see their relationship, you get to see how that affected both of them, and then you get to see them go through an adventure together,
Yeah.
and how they both deal with that. Because Indiana Jones is still the rugged guy that's no nonsense. He takes action, asks questions later. Where Sean Connery has never done something like this. He's like, the first thing what is it? He shoots someone or whatever, and then he's like, "Look what you did." He's like shocked that that's the route that they had to go.
Yeah.
Even though he's in with the Nazis, he knows that we're probably going to have to get violent here. So,
Yeah.
how could you?
I told you, Dad.
Yeah.
Don't call me Junior.
Don't call me Junior. Yeah, the first thing he swings through and he hits him over. Sean Connery hits Harrison Ford over the head with a pot.
Oh yeah. So
And
yeah,
he
because
thinks that it's like Ming Dynasty. He's like worried about that over him hitting his son, but then he's like, "Oh, it's a fake. So you could tell." And it's like going over why it's important.
yeah, he hits him over the head because his son's trying to rescue him, and he's just
Someone's in his room. Yeah, it's a Nazi.
unfazed, totally unfazed.
They use the door, Dad.
Good point.
Good point.
And I love all of his reactions whenever they're dealing with Nazis, especially like there's the bike chase, and then Indiana Jones will just like chuck something into like the wheel of a bike, and it like sends it spiraling and knocks the guy
looks
out.
at him all
Straight up kills
disappointed.
him.
Yeah.
And he's like, and then he looks over in Sean Connery's face of just total parental disapproves of that behavior entirely.
But then he'll never admit to his own mistake. So there's a scene in the film that perfectly encapsulates their relationship. So Indiana Jones is flying a plane, and he's being chased by a couple of Nazis. So Sean Connery jumps in the gun turret, and he starts shooting at him, and he's following a plane, and then ends up shooting their own tail.
Yeah.
He's like, "I'm sorry, son. They got us." He won't admit that he did it.
Right.
But then later, he ends up realizing he's the only one with a solution to get the final pilot. So he goes and he uses his umbrella to scare all the birds up into the plane and causes it to crash. He does exactly the same thing that Indiana Jones has been doing the whole movie, the thing that he was disappointed in him doing.
Right.
But he's all proud of himself for it. He's like, "I suddenly remembered my Charlemagne. It's like, my weapons will be the rocks and the birds of the air."
Yeah. It's
He
like
like
some
walks
oh.
out on the beach. Like, okay.
The thing about that is it's very layered when you take a step back and think about it, because he has this the same feeling towards Indiana in terms of his parenting. He's like, I was a good parent. And he's like, Dad, you were never there. What are you talking about? And he's just like, oh, what do you want to talk about? And
Right.
he's like,
I can't think of anything, Dad.
and he's like, well, then what are you complaining about? And
Yeah.
he's like, oh,
We got to get to work. And then he goes into like looking at his journal.
right. But it's like, that kind of, I'm going to shrug off the responsibility. Like,
Right.
what are you talking about? Like, I taught you self-reliance,
Yep.
and that's what I had to aspire to. So,
But he has a point. I mean, would Indiana Jones be what he was if he hadn't been what he was?
he does have a point, and it is interesting, but it also is just, it matches up with his character, I guess is the idea, right? So when he can't admit to like destroying the tail and sabotaging them, it's the same reason why he can't admit that he made some mistakes as a parent in some ways, So it perfectly suits the character, and because there's consistency there, it works a lot better. It also just works much better as a film, and we talked like earlier before with Temple of Doom, this like nonsensical roundabout scene with gags and whatever, just trying to get this like the diamond or the antidote or whatever. Well, in this, there's a moment of that. At the very beginning, it's like kind of seeing Indiana Jones when he's younger, like a late teen, and he steals this artifact and then he has to give it up. And then it does a cut to seeing him as an adult, and he's on this ship, and there's rain crashing down, and he's trying to get this cross again. And there's a moment.
Same artifact, yeah.
The same artifact, yeah. And so the cross gets like dropped, and it starts sliding to the edge of the water. If that thing goes overboard, no one's ever going to see it again.
Lost to the sea.
Right. So he makes a dive, and he grabs it, and that's it. That's all we needed.
That's all you needed.
It's like 5 seconds long. It doesn't need to be this whole thing like, oh, is he going to get it? Where's the gags? It's like, look, it's not a gag. It's just adding some tension. You see that go to the edge, you go, oh, man, that's a treasure. That should not be lost. And then Jones grabs it, and you're like, whew, good thing we saved it. That's it. It's just the excitement of the adventure. Don't go on and on and on.
Right.
And
don't wear out the audience's patience.
Exactly. And so it's clear they learned their lesson from Temple of Doom. It was like, well, let's just scale that back.
But that's a testament to the rest of the film too, is that the humor all felt really organic to the movie, and that's probably also what made it so fun, because it has a lot more. It's not gags, but it's humor that is involved in the film rather than like pausing everything to like do this whole gag sequence of trying to get the diamond and the antidote and stuff. Like there's an instance where they're both on a blimp, and Indiana gets up because he realizes they're getting chased by the Nazis and they're about to get found out. The Nazi comes over and he finds Sean Connery, but Indiana Jones has gone and put on one of the uniforms of the guy from the blimp.
The ticket collector.
Yeah, and he comes over and he's like, where's your ticket? And the guy turns around and he hits him and throws him out the window, and everybody looks over because he does it in public, and he's like, no ticket.
Yeah.
So then everybody starts scrambling for their ticket. And it's like, it's totally nonsensical if it happened in real life or whatever.
Right.
But it's funny to the movie because, like, this is kind of the action adventure, like, serial drama that we would be watching. It would have these moments where it's like, these are just these fantasy moments where we wish we could punch a Nazi and throw him out of a blimp and everybody would just accept it. Right. But that's like part of the Indiana Jones action adventure style.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't betray the character, for one.
Right.
Because if he's like scrabbling on the floor, like, oh my goodness, I got to get this antidote because I drank some poison. I didn't realize it was poison. Like, come on. Like, how did you even get into this mess?
Right.
So, he's resourceful. He figures out, okay, we got a Nazi coming on board. I'm going to have to deal with this guy.
Yeah.
So, it shows actually him in a position of power. Not that he can't make mistakes or be weak. I mean, that happens at the very beginning of Raiders, where it's like, oh, shoot, you got caught. You couldn't get away with the treasure. You got the treasure, but you couldn't.
Right, someone bested
the deal.
You. Yeah, I thought you.
Exactly. So it's like, it's not that he can't fail. It's just like, it needs to feel like a fair battle instead of just like, well, Indiana Jones, start acting like a moron now. Yeah. It's like, why? Why would we be interested in that? That makes no sense.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's a component of it. The other part of that too, though, is that it does feed back into the story, because the Nazis now know they're on this blimp for sure,
right,
because they were looking for them. And so now that they know they're there, they mobilize and come after them, and they radio the blimp. And it's like, and Jones says, they must have figured out that I, disabled their radio.
Yep.
And that's how they communicated. He's like, because I thought we'd have more time than this, and we would have, landed it or something like that. So, it's like there was a lot of narrative usage that plays into. So yeah, yes, they had a bit of fun, but it wasn't super long. It wasn't like try to get with it, audience. It didn't have that vibe. It was just like something that Jones would do. His solution to a problem: punch the guy. Versus, like Sean Connery's character is like, I remember it's a bit of poetry.
Yeah.
I'll use that to solve this problem. The other thing that's cool about this movie too, and it does have a slight advantage because it did come after, so technology advances, but all the sequences look a lot better than they do in Temple of Doom. There's a couple of stuff in Temple of Doom, like where they're walking on like these bugs on the ground, and then it just is like a shot of like the bugs, and then a shot of like them, and you're supposed to connect that there's bugs everywhere, but there's not that many bugs, and the actor's not really there with that many bugs. So there was things like that came up where I was like, this is the kind of mystery science theater movie technique, is just like, well, let me show you an iguana in a cage, and then I'll cut back to people in a car looking afraid.
Right.
So the iguana's huge, right? It's
Clearly.
going to get them.
Duh.
And then let's cut back, and now the car is really, a hot rod that I just kind of...
Hot wheel.
Or Hot Wheel, yeah. It's just a little Hot Wheel I put there. And then you could tell, clearly, it's like kind of that sort of logic. Whereas with, Last Crusade, like that opening scene, they're going into this tomb and there's rats everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked good. It looked like the actors were interacting with real rats, just like
probably were.
Around. So that came across. So I don't know how much of it was tricked or not, but if it looks natural, then it works better for the film. And Temple of Doom just had some merits. Because even again, like the crocodiles, it was like, again, like shot of crocodile eating,
right.
and then like shot of people hanging from bridge. They were never like connected, so it felt like, oh my goodness, it's right there, it's gonna get it. No, that was never, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously they got a budget. Steven Spielberg is a lot more. He's got a lot more notoriety. Probably have ILM gone through a bunch of work from.
But even
all
like
their works.
Style, like because Raiders does a better job too. Like with the snake,
it does.
There's that really good part where Indiana Jones kind of gets up, and then there's the cobra at him, and you can't get bit by a cobra, you'll die. So they
Speak
put
for
it
yourself.
Yeah. So what they did was they put the cobra in a glass cage, and so you can't see the glass whatsoever. So it looks like he's looking right at it.
Right.
And then it like snaps at him or whatever, and then he, so but you see how it's like you just use creativity. If you're trying to be like get something and it's not looking right, it's like you got a creative problem solve. And I'm not saying that you're always going to do it perfectly. I'm not saying I would do it better.
Yeah.
I'm just saying they did do it better in Raiders, and then they kind of stumbled in Temple of Doom. Another reason why that movie's not as good. And then in Last Crusade, they were like, well, let's just use real rats.
Could have been that. Maybe they just had a better technique of making it look real. I mean, whatever it was, it looks really real. I wouldn't have liked being in there with all this. Ugh, gross. Those rats are gross looking. But yeah, I mean, it just has that, because Temple of Doom also, like you were saying, has that really high octane. Doesn't have a lot of breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Last Crusade,
it has breaks. They're just very dark.
They're also like, all right, well, we'll slow it down and rip the heart out, and then we'll get back to the movie. But this one, it goes back to that form of, he goes back to the school, he's teaching again, they send him back out to do the mission. Yeah. He explains what the artifact is and what it can do and all this kind of stuff. And then he gets to explore again, looking for the clues that lead to the artifact. So you go to the tomb, and then you have this third faction that are trying to protect the Grail that he has to deal with as well. And so you've got a couple of different people that he's got to deal with on multiple levels, multiple bases. And then you have like a lot of bigger set pieces. So like one, for instance, was when they're going through the desert, which kind of was like a almost Lawrence of Arabia type of feel, where he's on a horse, and then there's a Nazi tank, and a couple of vehicles and he's like riding circles around him and trying to take him out and save his dad. And that part's all really great too. It's like, all right, if we got some money and some time to do all this. I mean, they got a tank on set. That's cool.
Yeah.
And they actually made it look pretty great. And so it was a lot more of the like action side coming in as well. So yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to say in the negative on this movie. It's like, if you want a pure Indiana Jones experience, and the nice thing is you don't have to watch them in any particular order. You can kind of just pick any one that you want and just put it on. But Last Crusade is going to be, like, that's probably the quintessential Indiana Jones film.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I said, it's formula perfected, doesn't have an ounce of fat on it. It's a lot of fun. Humor's great. Sean Connery's great. It's a great movie. Like,
riding off into the sunset in the end. I mean, what a better
exactly.
way to close it
It's
out?
got the double agent. He
Yep.
meets Hitler in the movie. Like,
well, yeah. See, that was a good example of a slower scene.
yeah.
And same with like the ticket one. It's like those were interesting scenes to resolve conflict, but they don't resort to. Well, there's a little bit of violence, but not a ton of violence. It's not a big action scene.
He got hit once.
It's one punch.
Let's not argue about who hit who.
You know, it's more about a portrayal of character at that
Right.
point. Yeah, and so those are good examples where they can slow the pace down. I do like the third faction quite a bit as well. That
Yeah.
was an interesting twist to it.
It adds good depth.
Mm-hmm. I love how they're introduced to where they're destroying the library, and there's
Yes.
that guy like checking out books, and every time he
Best.
stamps it.
Yep. Yeah, Indiana Jones is trying to break a tile on the floor, and every time he slams on it, the bookkeeper or whatever, the teller at the front, he's got a stamp, and every time he hits it, boom. So he thinks it's a stamp. It happens 3 times, and at the end, it's a great scene because they don't harp on that one too long either. Where it's just like dragging it out because like, isn't it funny? It's like, well, it was the first time.
Well, they bring it out because they have to address it because Indiana Jones is making a lot of noise
in a library.
So in a library, someone's gonna react.
Right.
So they're like, well, what if it happens just so coincidentally that he's like, wait a minute, like I'm not gonna investigate. I'm trying to investigate this thing, and like redirects.
You think he has this power, and he sets it up and he like observes it for a while. It's hilarious, but it's like this is the kind of humor that lands. This is the good stuff, not the stupid gag stuff.
And using the film language to communicate the humor as well, because when he slams it, you make the connection. You see it because you hear it with the sound. And then it does it like a second time. And when the third time comes around, you never see him slam the stamp. It just cuts to him having already done that.
Holding the stamp and then
he just lifts it. And it's such great visual humor because you see Indiana Jones slam it, and then it's like, okay, he's making progress. Then it cuts back, and oh yeah, there's that guy, and you know that like, wouldn't it be hilarious if it just so happened to line up with that pattern once more?
Right.
And so yeah, it's just kind of that. I don't know. Maybe they were kind of going back to like Charlie Chaplin or something. Some one of the masters of visual humor.
Whatever it was, they nailed it. Yeah, I don't think there was any jokes that didn't land for me in the film, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's one of those. It's just, like the highs are great, the lows are great, action's great, the adventure's great, mystery's great, characters are all good. Like, and there's depth to all the characters, and the depth was all where it needed to be. Bad guys are extra bad, and then the double agent was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was just it had it.
Even you commented, like, when he first meets Elsa, their banter with each other is just on point.
Phenomenal.
Great chemistry, great witty dialogue, good counterplays back and forth.
Yeah, she actually, like, holds her own. Because in the previous one, and this isn't a testament to the actress, but she seems like this really dumb person who's just materialistic and, like, doesn't really care about anything. And then is just thrown in there as a love interest. And, like, I understand that in these episodic series, like, you're going to have that. Star Trek is a good example of that, where it's just, like, Kirk runs into a new love interest so often. But it's not because he's a womanizer. Yeah. It's just because of certain factors that may be external to the show itself. But in this one, like, this character actually felt like not only an organic character to the story, but also someone that Jones would actually be interested in. Because she can hold her own. She's fairly smart. Like, she's pretty
cares
winty.
About archaeology stuff.
Cares about that. Yeah, and then she's
the share passion.
Right. Yeah. But also she's trying to manipulate him, as you find out later, so it makes sense as to why she would allow him to, like, get as far as he did. So I don't know, it lent a lot to the story rather than just being a love interest for Jones.
Right.
Like, it felt organic to all the other portions of the narrative. So yeah.
I hate to end it on a bad note, but there is one joke that I don't think works quite as well.
Okay.
You're like, we have to do this.
I'm listening. I don't remember what you're going to say. So.
Well, it has to do with the fact that Elsa, Jones, and Jones' dad.
Just awkward.
It's just an awkward.
It wasn't at the same time, but they mentioned that they had the same girl.
Yeah, like, so it's this kind of like awkward conversation, and they kind of don't let it go.
No.
I wish they would have let that go, because they introduce it, and then like later on it's like they mention it again, and then later on they mention it again. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
we get it.
Because Jones, or Papa Jones, we'll call him Papa Jones. He mentions that he knew that she was a double agent, and Indiana's like, "How'd you know?" Talks in her sleep, and it should have been right there.
And it should have just stayed there.
Where
yeah.
Indiana Jones, if you're gonna, I wouldn't have just put it in there at
I
all.
wouldn't have either, but yeah.
But if you're gonna put it in, Indiana Jones should have just been like, and then they both drop it, because like that's how you would deal with that situation. Like, they just don't bring it up again. You just don't mention it. Don't talk about it. It is what it is. Like, unfortunate, it's a reality, but it is a reality. We won't mention it anymore ever.
Which shall not be spoken of anymore.
Yeah, but yeah, that's fair. It was just awkward. It's hard to like accept. Like, ugh, gross.
And they keep bringing it back.
Right. Like, I got it the first time. I didn't like it then either. So
I hate to do that to you, Last Crusade, but it was your joke to use to ruin the movie.
Wrong. F. Rest of the jokes landed though.
Yeah. Great movie. Great couple of movies.
Highly recommend. As a series, like if you just like first and third, just ignore Temple of Doom. Just ignore it. It doesn't exist. It'll probably go with the other two that we may or may not reference soon. Maybe.
This has been Indiana Jones.